Alrighty, guys, we are live and I'm so excited to be part of this webinar. It's a very important topic for this time of the year. And this webinar, we're going to be talking about the best strategies and tips to prepare for selling on Amazon for Q4, which is literally just around the corner. I'm your host, Amanda, for this webinar, kindly sponsored by Proboxx. Now, Proboxx is your all-in-one digital logistics provider where you can manage all your quotes, your shipments, see them in real time, manage your documents, costs, data, everything, all at the touch of a button. And we have some super special guests, and I'm so excited to get to talk to Vincenzo Toscano. I hope I pronounced that correctly, but I've been watching a load of your really informative webinars on Amazon. You are the founder and CEO of EComcy, and you are now an Amazon and Walmart consultant and also an e-com strategist. But you were originally a successful aerospace engineer, so that's quite a change. So yeah, super cool background there. But you missed the freedom of living the life, I guess, and stumbled across Amazon FBA, as most of us have, and found that it was such a great business model that you went on to launch multiple products and to scale, and love the model so much that you're now helping others to do the same with your agency, EComcy. So welcome, Vincenzo.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Yes, thank you very much for having me the opportunity to share my knowledge today with your audience. I love what you guys doing with Proboxx and the technology you guys bring into the space and the support you bring into the Amazon community. So definitely looking forward to this conversation because I'm sure a lot of people right now is very nervous or preparing for Q4. And I'm pretty sure with this conversation, we can clear a lot of those questions that are very important to make sure everybody has a successful Q4. So yeah, can't wait.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is the actual quarter that everybody looks forward to as a seller for the year. So yeah, super excited about this one. So next we have our very own CEO of Proboxx, Amit Rosenthal. Amit is an experienced and results-driven logistics professional with a strong entrepreneurial spirit, specializing in the fast-paced and ever-evolving world of logistics and e-com. Amit has more than 15 years of experience in logistics and successfully navigates complex global supply chains and develops comprehensive strategies to streamline processes, improve productivity, and reduce operational costs for his clients. Welcome, Amit.
Hi, thank you. Thank you.
I have to vouch for you because, I've obviously worked with you guys in the past, and it's been such a great experience. You guys really care about your customers.
Thank you.
Okay, guys, so let's dive in because I know we've got limited time and we've got lots to talk about. So the first burning question that we have for you guys is, first of all, just give us a rundown of the significance of selling in Q4 on Amazon.
Yeah, of course. So I would say preparing for Q4 is super important for Amazon sellers, especially because we need to understand that for a lot of categories and niches, this is usually the period where most of the people will make the biggest amount of the revenue within a calendar year. So it's very important that we take this period very seriously because in this period alone, we have Halloween, we have Thanksgiving, Black Friday, Cyber Monday, Boxing Day, New Year's Eve. So many key dates that if you don't prepare for those, you're gonna leave a lot of money on the table. And that's why I think webinars like this are very important because we're gonna be touching all the main things you need to prepare when it comes to Q4. I will say one of the main things people struggle, and we're gonna be touching on these points and just making a quick summary when it comes to Q4 and then don't prepare for that is like inventory management. They don't really know how much inventory they should have in hand to avoid going out of stock, going out of stock, and we see this on all the podcasts, all the blogs, and everything is the worst thing that can happen when it comes to selling on Amazon. Then a lot of people don't really take in consideration the logistics of things, like how much stock they should have on a 3PL, when they should be shipping from China, things like that. And another thing people really struggle about is preparing when it comes to the strategy. So I'm talking about listing optimization, Amazon advertisement. And I think the reason why these areas are so important and why can definitely make you win or lose in Q4 is because usually on top of all this complexity I just mentioned, because of the influx of extra traffic you have during this period, if you don't really take advantage of the optimization, especially when it comes to advertisement and listing optimization, you can basically be left behind. And especially the people that know what they're doing, they're gonna take a bigger pie of what they're already taking previously to Q4. And I think that's why it's super important, especially because you also need to understand that Q4, due to the extra amount of traffic and sales it's going to bring to your business, it can really set you forward for the next year, because this can improve your organic ranking. This can really improve the amount of reviews you can now have for the next year. This can even give you data to explore new variations or new product lineups you didn't really think of, because of the data that comes into the system during Q4. So I think those are usually the things I say that define Q4 as the most important period, because I strongly believe that it can definitely make or break your business if you don't do the things correctly during this period. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially when you're dealing with extra costs and increased PPC costs and inventory costs, there's a lot to take into consideration.
For sure.
Right. I think one of the biggest issues that I see with customers or with Amazon sales in general, that they are not really aware of like their numbers. So like just to give one example, like Amazon increased the FBA fees dramatically, I think by like about 30% in Q4. And like unless you're gonna add this into your profitability eventually, so you will not know if you are in profit, or if your products are in losing state. So that's one thing I would definitely check to understand my numbers from a business point of view. Another thing is that like, again, like there is like new sellers, which this is going to be the first like Q4. And there are of course advanced sellers that this is the second, third, fourth, or even fifth time and more. And they have like data on their specific product, how it went like last year. And so they can plan and manage their inventory accordingly. But if you are a new Amazon seller, that's a big problem, because you will definitely gonna see increase in your sales, right? In your sales velocity. So Vincenzo, to you, if you are a new seller, let's try to focus in this case with new seller now, how would you plan your inventory if you don't have data from previous years?
Sure. So one of the things I usually do is analyze my top competitors within my category, and especially the competitors that have been in the market for more than 12 months, ideally 24 months, which gives me enough data to really make a validated decision on if the actual data is valid or not. And usually what I do with tools such as, for example, a Helium 10 or Data Dive, I usually try to see the amount of sales they were making on a monthly basis. That's as a starting baseline to really understand what is the volume of sales and so on. And then on top of that, I start looking at seasonality, because again, the sales they're making maybe now, which Helium 10 data that give me right now, maybe it's not ideal for Q4, because Q4, as you mentioned, has an influx of traffic and sales. So I first need to understand the baseline, and then I need to understand the variation of what happens during Q4. To look at that, usually what I do is I also have an analysis of, for example, at the product level. So you have tools again, such as Helium 10, you can see a historical graph of sales throughout basically to the beginning of times of that listing. As you can see the variation of how many sales they were making throughout a specific period. So usually what I try to do, try to replicate this across my top 10, 15 competitors, and then try to find what is the average influx they were having from traditional sales to Q4. So maybe identify, usually they have a 13% increase, a 15% increase, 20% increase. Once identify what's that percentage of the baseline of the actual niche itself, then what I do, okay, maybe the niche itself, they are the baseline of sales of what people do on a monthly basis for the top 10 sellers. It's 1,000 units, and then identify that during Q4, the influx is of 15%. That means during Q4 on a monthly basis, most likely I'm going to be selling around 1,200 units per month. And then once I identify what is the increase of basically from normal baseline to Q4, then of course you also need to be realistic that you're most likely not going to be selling that amount if you are a new seller, because again, this is taking the baseline of new of established sellers and sellers that have been there for a while now, a lot of views and things like that. So usually what I do is take in consideration the baseline of the top 10 sellers. If they already have a lot of reviews and a lot of positioning, usually I try to estimate at least to try to do at least 50% of what they were doing on a monthly basis, right? That's a good starting point. That means if the top sellers are doing 1,200 on a monthly basis during Q4, I should be aiming around 600 units per month. If I have no reviews, I'm basically starting from scratch. I think I also want to add on top of this strategy is that I would advise that for everybody listening to this, of course, sometimes it's difficult to avoid because you don't control the production lineups and you don't really control how much time it's going to take to ship some products from China to or specific country to Amazon. And therefore the launch falls into Q4. But I would say if you can avoid a Q4, I will do so, especially because what happens during Q4 is that it's going to be much more difficult for you to get position. And it's going to be more costly, right? Because the cost per click is more expensive because everybody's trying to bid more on keywords to get position. Also, on top of that, most of the people that is already been selling on that niche, they already have data maybe you don't have, and they're already optimizing their listings. They already know what keywords work on the PPC or not. You don't have that data. And on top of that, you also need to consider during Q4, people is going to have very aggressive pricing because you have Black Friday, Cyber Monday, Halloween, all the days that I already mentioned. And if they have an aggressive pricing, they have very good reviews and they already have a strong positioning because they've been selling before you. When you come to market, which is usually the best way to still sell is by having aggressive pricing, if you fall into the period where competition that is already established has also aggressive pricing, you're losing that advantage that usually you're going to have during Q1, Q2, and Q3. So if you can avoid it, I would. If you can, again, going back to the drawing board, and of course we're going to be touching PPC and all of that, I would say try to do the estimation I just told you, understand the baseline of your top competitors, try to do a educated guess of being conservative of how many you can sell without reviews and with a competitive pricing, which usually 50% is a good baseline, and go from there, and then of course start scaling that baseline as you move forward with your position and reviews and so on. Yeah.
Wow, that's really interesting, Vincenzo, because a lot of new sellers tend to want to launch in Q4 because they think they're going to get the best traction and the best amount of sales to get going.
Yeah.
But that is really sound advice. So would you say that launching as a new seller, then it's launching in Q1 when all the Christmas, Thanksgiving days, etc., have gone, that it gives you a successful launch if you're launching Q1 or Q2?
Yeah, I would say especially because we need to understand that one of the main drivers that contributes towards the cost of your launch is advertisement. And if the cost per click is up, which is the fact during Q4, that means the most expensive period to launch a product is Q4, right? So therefore we need to avoid those periods. And that's why I would say Q1 and Q2 is actually a better period to get started with. And actually I would say Q4 is true that maybe it's not ideal when it comes to launching product, but it's the best period to gather data, because this is usually the best period to understand what's selling the most during which months, seasonality products, new trends, things like that. And then you can actually harvest that data to maybe even do pro research, which I would say usually Q4 is very good to also do pro research because it helps define trends much easier due to X amount of data. And then you can use that to basically, if you're very efficient with time and production and all that, using that data from Q4, and basically by Q2, Q3, you're launching a product, then you're going to harvest enough data to basically optimize listing your PPC, and you're going to be ready by next Q4 with a more clever and efficient strategy, right, than just launching Q4 without any basically strategy. More than strategy, I would say the thing that really allow you to succeed during launch, which is the data you're going to be lacking, right? Yeah. So that's my advice.
Yeah, awesome. They're talking about trending products. How do you research trending products for Q4 if somebody wanted to get into that? Or
Mhm.
what are the trending products for Q4? Do you have anything to share on that?
Yeah, sure. So usually when it comes to trendy products and categories, I would say that something I like to do a lot is during Q4. I like to analyze, basically use historical data, right? So usually the best way to do this is if you have access, for example, just to give you this example, and then I'm going to jump into a strategies. If you have access to brand analytics, for example, you can download a Q4 data towards the end of December. You download that data, and then you save it to basically manipulate that data later on to do some pro research. You can even go back in time and also look past years data to find some trends at the keyword level and at the pro level. Another thing I usually like to do as well when it comes to a Q4 and pro analysis is to also understand, and there are plenty of reports, and I'm going to name the categories here so you can use this to your advantage. Understand what are usually the categories that move the biggest volume in revenue. So the number one is always going to be electronics. The second one usually is going to be around clothing and shoes and things like that. Then you have home and kitchen, the third place, and then you have beauty and personal care. Those are usually the top 3, 4, and then from that it drops all the way to the bottom in terms of pet supplies, sports, baby, and so on. So if you're really looking for the biggest category, just for everybody listening this, and maybe they want to know which is the best biggest category, you should be looking into electronics. But on the other hand, which I'm pretty sure you have already heard of, electronics is a very tough category because that means a lot of returns. It's very difficult to keep a high standard when it comes to the production. It's a very tough one, and also the cost per click is very high. So those are some of the two main, of course, methods using by analytics and understanding what are the main categories and diving in. I would say the third one, which is also very efficient, and you should be doing that during Q4. That's the issue. Is basically using, for example, tools such as also a Helium 10. And what you can do with Helium 10 is that you can also research specific categories. Maybe you don't want to do electronics. You want to do, for example, pet supplies, which is less, it's also very heavy in terms of revenue during Q4, but it's not as competitive as the one I already mentioned. And what you can do on a monthly basis is basically gather data on the pet supplies niche during this Q4 2023, what is being selling the most, what is the revenue, what are the trends, how competitive these niches are, and then consolidate this data again with brand analytics if you have access. Again, the issue with brand analytics, you need to already have an account and have your brand raised and all that. So that's why that advice wouldn't apply to everybody. This one with Helium 10 would, because anybody can just pay the tool and get access to it. And then what you do is you consolidate this data, understand what are the things that during this month, because it's data coming live from this Q4 period, is been selling the most. And then of course you can prepare for next Q4 because you have now a clean data from 2023, so you can prepare for 2024 and prepare the launch during Q2, Q3, optimize, scale, and be profitable on Q4 next year.
Yeah, this is great advice, Vincenzo. That's awesome for anybody who wants to start now to launch in 2024 with products that you know are going to fly. Yeah. Now, obviously Q4, everybody wants everything to be looking perfect. So what tips do you have for like optimizing your listing or doing sort of any types of pricing or promotion around your product to get the most out of Q4?
Yeah, so I would say when it comes to a pricing, of course, we need to have a strategy in place because, as I already mentioned, most of the main competitors, they're going to be doing some kind of strategy when it comes to pricing. So this is something that, of course, you need to factor within your margins. That's another thing that, of course, I see people struggling with when it comes to Q4. When they try to launch a promotion, they don't really know the percentage they should be using or the size of the coupon. And they just try random percentages of seeing what the competition is doing and trying to replicate that. And that's a big no-no because, again, you need to understand your numbers in depth, right? What's the point of doing a 30% discount if you're going to be in red every single sale? and then it's gonna be tough on you, unless of course you do that on purpose because maybe you want to reach organic ranking and position. That's another conversation. But if you really want to focus on profitability, which some people on Q4, that's what they actually want to focus on, you need to be careful with these things, because maybe you say, okay, maybe I can put up a discount of 15%. I lower my profitability from $4 to $2 per unit, as a quick example. But I know that by making the math, if I'm going to be moving twice the inventory, I make the more profit in volume, right? So those are things you need to calculate, because sometimes, yes, it makes sense to have less profitability on the unit basis, but because you're going to move more volume, you're going to make more money. When it comes to preparing for this Q4, you also need to be very selective with which promotions you get engaged on and which one you decide to pay. Because again, Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and all these different dates, Amazon is going to charge you as a premium fee if you want to be part of some of the exclusive promotion days. And there are also deadlines for which you need within the Amazon dashboard. By looking at different news blog on the Amazon, it tells you which are the deadlines. Make sure you submit a promotion before then, because otherwise usually 2 months to 1 month early to the date, they close the date to when you can register for Black Friday, for example, and Cyber Monday. So ideally by September, you should already be thinking about what you want to do for Black Friday and Cyber Monday. And the other thing is, most of the time, don't also get caught that the only way to really make it big during Q4 is by paying all these premium position that Amazon tell you, like also Prime Day and so on, because sometimes we have seen that you can achieve very similar result by just adding a coupon or just by adding a strict true sale price. And you know, sometimes the extra premium you're gonna get from these placements is not really gonna move the needle. I would say test it once, and if you, of course, want to see if you're missing out or not on this opportunity. But I would say don't think that the only way to succeed that you need to pay all these fees and premium placements that Amazon gives you, because it can easily get very fast into the reds. And then what's the point? You're showing everywhere on all the different placements, but you're losing money on every single set, right? And then the last advice I would say when it comes to pricing for Q4, so we can conclude this point, is inventory. What I mean by this is, of course, when you add a discount, this is going to add sales velocity. That means you're going to move more inventory. And if you don't factor that sales velocity, you can easily go out of stock, because you're not factoring into the calculation that you're having a price that you're not having the rest of the year. And if you don't factor that into your inventory and your lead time from shipping from a location to Amazon, then the production it takes to produce X amount of sales, then what's the point? You sold more, you maybe did a little bit more money, but then you're out of stock the rest of towards the end of December and January. And when you come back in February, you lost all the positioning, and all the hard work is actually gonna give you a more negative outcome than a positive outcome. So those things are very important. So it's not only about pricing, but actually if you can control the extra amount of sales that pricing strategy is gonna bring you.
Yeah, it's tricky.
So on that, I would say that from my experience with working with Amazon sellers for 2 years now, like normally during Q4, because of what Vincenzo just described, like people always like eventually come to a situation that are out of stock. So we see, like from a freight forwarding point of view, so many air express shipments because people want the inventory in, so they don't have the time. Production always delayed. I'm not sure if anyone knows, but like on October, normally between October 1st to October 7th, there is a big like holiday in China. So until they resume work, they go work like about like September 30th. Until they resume work, it's like about, let's say, October 8th to October 10th. The production line always with delays. So in that case, again, like the situation, sellers want to be in stock always, but especially during Q4. And in this case, we see tons of air express shipment. So again, like knowing and managing your inventory, when to ship. Basically, if you planned correctly to Q4, you should basically already be in like shipped products into FBA Center for sure already. But if you didn't, it's time, because it's be like really like no brainer that you're gonna eventually be out of stock, and that just sucks, because Without any stock, you have no business. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
the key factor that need to consider. Talking to your freight forwarder, try to understand like transit time, what's the current situation, take into consideration delays, which also a big factor, not just in Proboxx, but also UPS, FedEx, DHL, those carrier companies during Q4 are in intense overload of work and delays are always happening. So take at least, like if a freight forwarder say to you it's going to take 30, 35 days, take at least extra 20, like 20% additional. So it's going to be 40, 45 days. And always planning like in a worst case scenario and not in the best case scenario. Because if you're going to planning in the best case scenario, so I'm not saying it's not, there is a chance that your inventory will be on time, but there is a bigger chance that the inventory will not be there on time. So planning efficiently, that's the key. That's the key that I can, like the biggest key I can give you.
Yeah, and what about
For
the
sure.
check-in times as well for around that time for Q4? Getting goods into the FBA into a Amazon warehouse can take how long?
So
Yeah.
so now the situation there was new regulation by Amazon for carriers, right, for delivery. So that by himself make a lot of problem for freight forwarder because the carrier is the only one that basically sets the appointment and get the appointment date from Amazon. So putting that aside, which make a total chaos now in the freight forwarder industry, the inbound process can take during Q4 like sometimes 2 weeks, sometimes even 3 weeks, and there is like situation that basically you send the client a POD, proof of delivery, with I don't know date of delivery on October 15 or November 1st, and you don't see the inventory inbound even almost up until end of November. So
Yeah.
that's a key point that need to consider, and I'm sure Vincenzo have a lot of experience with that with his clients and with his brand as well.
Yeah, I think that's a big issue because, I mean, of course, there are standards that they should be respected in terms of timelines and everything, but the reality is sometimes this is not the case. So I will say, and we do that actually with our strategies and clients, is that when it comes to Q4, you always want to add an extra factor of discrepancy within the calculation of your lead times. So I would say sometimes we had 20-30% more discrepancy on top of what we already considered in terms of delays, because we want to make sure we compensate for a scenario such as the one Amit just described. Because if you don't, then just by having 2 or 3 of these mistakes during Q4, then it can completely destroy the whole plan of inventory management. And then it's going to be really difficult to catch up, especially because there are deadlines when it comes to when you can ship your inventory for a specific date. So for Black Friday, there's specific date. For Christmas Eve, there's specific dates, things like that. So that's why I would actually be very careful with this. And sometimes, of course, you need to do the calculation, but sometimes even smarter to have a little bit of overstock that actually lose those potential sales and going out of stock. Because again, sometimes paying the extra fee of overstock can be easily be justified by the extra amount of sales and organic position also that's going to bring you right, and say, okay, I rather don't pay any overstock fees, but then what's the point? You lost some organic position, you also lost a lot of sales that could be very profitable for you, and then in the long term those few hundreds that you wanted to save actually become thousands because of that decision.
So Amit, would you say, and Vincenzo, just plan for worst case scenario for logistics timings for Q4, and what about, and also if you're doing like an express service or air cargo, you're spending all this extra money to get it there, and then it's taking 2 to 6 weeks to check in. So does that happen with these particular services?
So yeah,
that's
so
absolutely,
basically,
please, Vincenzo, please.
No, go. Yeah.
No, please,
Okay.
please go.
I just wanted to give some advice on this, and then of course we can move into what you wanted to add. Is that something that we're doing is that, let's say we're sending inventory during Q4 because we are running a low on certain SKUs and inventory. Usually within your calculation, again, this a micro we have designed and everything that you can put some formulas to factor discrepancies and all that. But essentially what we try to do is that, of course, we need to send another 1,000 units, and it's not those 1,000 units are gonna take maybe 15, 20 days to reach maybe 25 days to reach the US. What we do is, okay, we decide to send 300 units at express cargo. Most likely this is going to be at sometimes a break even or a little loss, but it's taking consideration the opportunity cost, right? Opportunity cost means, okay, this is going to avoid us from going out of stock. That means it's going to keep our VSR low, it's going to keep our organic positioning going, and this is going to buy us maybe 2 weeks time. That means by the time the other 800, 700 units arrive by sea or a slower shipment, it basically allows to buy sometimes, and most of the time it's at a break-even a strategy of losing a little bit of money, but with a bigger picture long term that you didn't lose that those sales and organic position and so on. So that's one thing. And the other thing we are actually advise, and again, this of course is going to be a little more expensive, but I would advise to explore it, is to always have some backup inventory outside of Amazon, usually using a 3PL. And usually, I'm pretty sure Amit has experience maybe with these strategies that basically you will have inventory on a 3PL and you will add a secondary offer under your listing as a FBM offer. That means you actually dealing with the logistics yourself, in this case 3PL. And what this allows you to do is that you have those 500 units that you're not going to touch there. You only have them as an insurance. Worst case scenario, you're running out of stock on FBA, you turn the FBM offer on, that kicks in and takes ownership of the buy box. The 3PL insurance 500 units start kicking in the shipment from the 3PL, and that buy you time to maybe ship from China. That's usually a good way to navigate that issue, because that makes sure the listing doesn't basically get suppressed because of lack of inventory, and then you can keep making sales, so you keep the snowball effect of sales, organic ranking, and so on. Yeah.
Awesome advice, Amit.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with Vincenzo. I would say that do not put all your eggs in one basket, meaning if you have one shipment of 1,000 units, don't ship it like by regular LCL and said it's going to be okay. Try to split your cargo like Vincenzo described, maybe half in Super Express and half by regular, half, or I don't know, 30% by air and 17% by regular sea. So you're going to have a backup, right? You want to have a backup. In terms of like having some stock in the US at a 3PL, so that's the conversation I have to admit that I'm having now with basically every client, because people like to avoid the 3PL because it's of course adding cost to the overall like cost of the product. But I do think that during Q4 specific, right? During Q4 specific, you have to have some. I don't know how many units, but you have to have some inventory in the US because you want to have the option to have a speed delivery. With that said, I would say that, like, from my experience, 3PL in the US, especially in the US, are in such a high capacity that the level of service is unbearable in some cases. And you also have to know your 3PL, and you have to put a huge emphasis on the service level during Q4, because everybody having their own problem during Q4. Another thing I would say here is that still, with all the problems, I still believe that have some inventory in the US is the key, right? I would say here that in terms of trying to have some method or that the inbound process will be faster. So listen, we work with Amazon carrier itself. We work with partner carrier like UPS. The client insert the UPS tracking in advance. Basically, you can never know what's going to be the end result. Like if the inbound process will be fast or super slow. So in my opinion, doesn't matter what is your process, you have to take into consideration slow inbound process. I know it can affect your IPI score and creating new shipments, but that's just the fact. So
Yeah.
try to consider like a low inbound at least minimum 10 days to 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Consider that into your planning and work accordingly.
Of course. Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. And also, as a new Amazon seller, you have stock limits still, right? Is that correct? So you've got that challenge on top of everything else and trying to manage shuttling in smaller quantities.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So initially, you're gonna have some limitations there. However, Amazon just introduced a few months back an option that now you can basically buy inventory within their system. You can bid for it. And basically, it's a system that you can bid to get extra inventory. And if you don't basically sell the extra inventory you requested, then Amazon will penalize you with a fee, right? So that's an option now people can use to navigate the issue of having limited inventory at the beginning. Or the second option is just to basically go with the 3PL as a backup initially, at least. Or I would say if you're in the US and you have the advantage of living there, I have clients that they have a garage, as most people in the US just use that initially to put some inventory in. And then it's very efficient you just request a UPS pickup when you need to send more. They come to your house and pick the extra 10 boxes. So that's another option. It's not going to cost you anything extra. You just use your warehouse for the initial 6 months as a little warehouse until you get the history Amazon requires you. So then you can ship more to Amazon. That's it.
That's awesome. I might have to find a friend in the US with the
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you will be surprised if you go to Facebook. There's a lot of groups that you can just say, "Yeah, I'm just looking to find somebody that has an extra, maybe garage that I can use. I pay you whatever, 50, $100." And most people is willing to do it because again, it's not really extra hassle, especially if it's empty and they're not using it. So,
Yeah.
Awesome. Now let's just chat quickly about advertising and marketing strategies for Q4, because I'm sure you've got some gems to share there and people would love to know what they are.
Yeah, for sure. So I would say the first thing when it comes to advertising, and this is very important because if you don't do this, then you might struggle to actually take the full potential of doing the right PPC strategy, is that you first want to make sure your listings are fully optimized, right? This is super important because at the end of the day, your PPC campaigns are going to be limited by how well your listings are optimized. This means having the right keywords on the listings, you're indexing for those keywords, having the keywords on the right placement within the listing itself. And on top of that, you want to make sure everything is working also on the back end. That means having the right search terms, the right subcategory. That's super important because if you don't have the right subcategory at the listing level, then sometimes Amazon doesn't allow you to build relevancy link between your product and certain keywords. And you might experience the issue that a lot of people usually are talking about on Facebook, which is basically not having the option to advertise under certain keywords, right? On top of that, to finalize the topic of listing optimization, you also want to be very smart with your images and A+ content. Something that we do with clients is that you want to use your secondary images and your A+ content or banners, for example, to reflect the seasonality. So, for example, during Halloween, we do a Halloween theme image as a secondary image and banner the A+ content. When it's Thanksgiving, the same. When it's Christmas, the same, because sometimes when people is looking for a specific product as a gift, especially during this seasonality, so for the intent used for this seasonality, if you put a certain branding around the seasonality in your listing, that automatically triggers the thinking, oh, actually this product was made to be used during this period or be given as a gift during this period, right? Especially if your product is a giftable product, you want to make sure that you reflect that that product is being designed to also be used as a gift during that season. So that's the first thing. Now, once you have done all this work, that's where the advertisement strategy comes into play. So the first thing you also want to do here, if you have some historical data, you want to go to the historical data. That means going back to last Q4 data. Something very important here that a lot of people do, and that's a waste, is they do advertisement during Q4, but they don't download the reports on a monthly basis from, let's say, September all the way to December. And what happens is if you want to then go back to that data now in August, Amazon is not going to allow you because you can go back up to 60 days on your PPC dashboard. So what you want to do is you want to download your reports on a monthly basis if you already did Q4 last year, so you can then save the data for this year. You want to then understand which are the keywords that are driving them most of the sales or the conversions and traffic during that specific period. And you want to make sure you optimize and prepare for those keywords, right? That means doing single keyword campaigns on the keywords that you know you're going to perform the best, doing placement optimization on the placement you know last Q4 performed the best for you, and that will apply for sponsor products, sponsor brands, and display campaigns. Something that is also very important during advertisement during Q4 is that you want to keep the you want to focus on the basics. And what I mean about this is that you want to avoid during, especially the specific dates when the actual thing is happening, like during Black Friday, for example. You want to stop focusing too much on testing new things, because usually during those periods is the worst period to test new things. First of all, because the cost per click is very high, and second of all is why would you put money into something that you haven't validated, right? And go into the save thing, which is usually the top 3-5 keywords that is been bringing sales for you historically. So you want to focus on that during Q4. And the other thing that is also very important on the advertisement side of things is that you want to have a very basically good strategy when it comes to the actual visuals of your PPC. I'm talking now in terms of sponsored brands, for example. Something that we do a lot is that, for example, we do videos that are Christmas theme or Halloween theme and target specific keywords that are made for that seasonality. So, for example, if you're selling let's say a cup for coffee, right? A coffee mug, right? So then, for example, what we do is we target Halloween a coffee mug, and of course, you also need to be mindful that sometimes your product doesn't apply for that seasonality, because if your coffee mug maybe is made, I don't know, of just gonna think of a random thing. Maybe it's a religious coffee mug about, I don't know, Jesus or something like that. And then you advertise Halloween. That doesn't connect, right? So you need to make sure that the actual product connects. And if that's the case, then you want to target a long tail keywords that reflect that seasonality. That's usually a very low hanging fruit. So what I mean by this is keywords that have embedded the actual event. So Halloween X, Christmas gift X, etc. These is usually keywords you want to have within your PPC. And going back to the creatives, you want to have a video campaigns that reflect the seasonality. And the same with sponsor brands. Maybe you want to have a sponsor brand banner, a top banner that reflects the seasonality. And that usually helps a lot when you come to conversion. Last thing that's also very important is the budget. Another mistake I see a lot when it comes to advertising during Q4 is that you know, they start advertising and maybe during the specific day, going back to Black Friday, they realize, okay, maybe towards the mid of the day, you already went out of budget and the performance wasn't as you expected. Then people, what they do is they start adding more budget. And then sometimes they end up spending what they spend on 2 weeks on one day, and they actually didn't make the money they wanted to, or most of the time they lose money. So ideally, what you want to do when it comes to advertisements, especially during specific days, if by mid of the day you already went out of stock and you didn't reach the performance, most of the time there's nothing you can do already to fix that, because by the time you do the adjustment, you earn more money, it's already too late. So I would say sometimes these dates are not going to work for you. I don't think that throwing more money or doing some last keyword change in the same day is going to fix it, because more time it doesn't. You need to make sure you have these strategies weeks ready before those specific dates happen, and try to avoid the panicking that, yeah, I just need to keep increasing my budget because my other competitor keeps showing and I don't, because that's usually what is going to bring you into the red. If you did your strategy for Q4 and you know how much money you need to have on a daily basis or monthly basis, and you hit that limit of spend, that's it. I mean, don't fall into the trap of casino roulette that, yes, I need to keep trying and trying because if it didn't, that's it. Move to the next one and focus on the next day or the next big event during Q4. And I would say the last thing to finish advertisement as well is that you want to sometimes combine these with strategies outside of Amazon as well. So what I mean by this, and it's being very powerful as well, is that you want to use some kind of external traffic. So this means using some kind of influencer strategy, using Amazon Lives, for example, that do live stream during these specific dates to feature your product, or do certain promotion in social media. So they send specific traffic and say, oh, try a Halloween 30 to get 30% on this product with this brand and partnership with, and you send traffic on TikTok, etc. This is something that if you're very clever with the right influencers as well, can help you mitigate the expensive cost per click. So you could potentially get some of that money out of advertisement that you know is not going to be profitable. Pay some influencers with that money, and sometimes that traffic is going to be cheaper and convert better if you select the right influencer as well.
Yeah, awesome. And is there some way of tracking any of the sales that come from external marketing on Amazon, so you can actually get an idea of how much that contributes to your overall sales?
Yeah, so you can use the Amazon attribution link. So basically you can design specific links to market where the traffic is coming from. It's not perfect, of course, but it gives you a very clear understanding of where the traffic is coming from and if it's converting. On top of that, you can also use the Amazon referral program, which give you a 10% commission whatever traffic you send outside of Amazon. If for example, if you do that very cleverly with the right influencer and then bring a lot of traffic and convert, that means essentially you're getting 10% of that money back, on top of taking the example I just did, that if you took that money out of PPC, you use that to influencers, they send you traffic that's converting well, and on top of that, Amazon's give you 10% back of that money. You can even be more profitable on certain niches where sometimes the PPC is just unbearable because you're paying $7 per click. You rather use that money for influencer and try to navigate the way with that backup strategy.
Yeah, awesome. So that attribution is available for all niches in Amazon?
Yeah, so it's basically a way for you to create a link and basically control where that is coming from. Mm-hmm.
Amazing. And so does that play into how you analyze and monitor all your performance for Q4 and helps develop, I guess, the strategy for your next Q4 or moving forward?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. So we check basically how the attribution work in terms of the traffic they brought and the amount of sales and all that. And usually that's a nice way to go if the strategy is gonna work moving forward in the future. If it does, then we just put more money next Q4. If it didn't, that means maybe instead of influencer, we might need to try maybe blogging or PR releases or other strategies, or even Google Ads. I think it's just a matter of keep testing, right? Because I think if you only sometimes you fall into the trap that the only solution is really the traditional PPC and that's it. I know for a fact that most of the top brands right now, they're doing much more than that. And if you don't try to explore, at least to some extent, you might be left with the questioning that you might think that actually your product is not good or you're not doing a good job with PPC, but sometimes the reality is you're doing things that you haven't tested. And if you do, maybe sometimes you can really compete with those brands in the first place, which you thought you couldn't. So yeah, keep testing for sure.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Vincenzo. And lastly, I think because we're getting close to time, is customer service management, because, you know, Q4 is like, you know, everybody knows that there's a lot more returns and there's a lot more kind of, customer kind of complaints to deal with. So what are the best strategies for dealing with your customers during that time?
So I will just give like an example on that, Vincenzo, before you're answering. I have a client that's selling like in the travel category. So he said that every January he has like hundreds of returns because like people getting the say, okay, the style is not good, whatever, boom. So it's total chaos.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, first of all, unfortunately, you're gonna have people that want to take advantage of the system, and it's just people that they take advantage of the 30-day return policies, and they just use the product and return it. So that's very difficult to fight, of course. Something that you can do, which again is a little bit gray area, but I have seen people doing that, is that, for example, you can put specific labels on your product or packaging that says, once you break this specific label or you remove this label, product is not returnable, right? So that's a way to, of course, you want to make sometimes these labels so specific steps within the packaging that wouldn't mean as soon as they open it, they can return it. Maybe it's more down the line when they want to test it or they want to make it under proper usage. For example, I don't know, you're selling a watch, right? You can test a watch and really see it, but maybe you put a policy that as soon as you remove the label to the second hand to start thinking, once you remove it, it's not returnable because the product comes into action, right? Unless it becomes faulty, that's another thing. So you can do things like that to really make people think further if you really want to pursue and fully utilize the product before returning it. To avoid that scam, right? That's the first tip I can think there. Of course, when it comes to customer service, something that is very important for you to define is SOPs. So SOPs means systems that really make very clear to your team what they need to do under certain scenarios. Something that we have done, for example, with a lot of our clients is that we have trained sometimes our team to understand how to use AI for this. In fact, some of our clients, what they're doing internally is that they have designed AIs for themselves. That means they have uploaded to this AI SOPs, so past a customer experience, typical comments, words, etc. And now basically the customer team, instead of having to ask their manager every single time, they will ask this AI, oh, this customer received the product without a specific covering. What should I do in this instance? So maybe the bot says based on what the manager has approved, okay, give them a 10 pound coupon for the next purchase and send them the cover because maybe they have the cover just as a single SKU, send them that by express by next day delivery. And as for if sorry about this, blah blah blah, and all of that. So this is usually a very nice way, because I'm pretty sure if you go into your reporting of customer service in terms of the history, there's going to be a pattern of what is usually the thing that happens. In clothing, is size, and in electronics, is faulty batteries. In plastics, it goes scratch, whatever. So if you really know what are your top 3-5 issues, design what is the plan of action based on that issue, and what is the compensation you're going to try to do to make the customer happy. And of course, it's also trial and error, because sometimes you try to just send a 10% discount coupon, they're not happy. Okay, I tested that multiple times, it didn't work. Maybe next time, now instead of sending a coupon, I'm gonna send them this X accessory that goes with the product for free. And then you identify that by sending this extra product by free, which is very minimal cost for you, makes the customer happy. Then you put that into your plan of action. And then that's usually how you then define SOPs and systems. So your team knows that during Q4, when those top 3 issues exactly arising because people complain about X and Y, you have the right answer and the right solution. So you can navigate that very efficiently and basically as a bulk operation, right?
Yeah, that's awesome. What about though at Christmas time when a lot of the returns come back and it's just gift not appropriate, like that's a big one.
Yeah, so if the gift is not appropriate, like let's say the customer come back to you and say, okay, the X product it wasn't appropriate. So this sometimes can be, for example, clothing, right? It wasn't the right size. Unfortunately, there's not much you can do, because if it didn't fit the person, then of course that's really the case, right? Again, if you then identify that there are definitely patterns of people trying to take advantage of you, like for, let's say, for as an example, a toy for a kid, right? Maybe you bought a toy for your kid, and the person comes back to you and says, okay, this toy my kid didn't like this toy. Okay. Something that you can do here as well is to put extra filters to really make sure they're not taking advantage. So for example, seeing if the packaging is being broken or things like that. All these things I mentioned, the only downside of this is that there's people, unfortunately, that has very bad way of acting, and they might just give you a 1-star review and really ruin your listing. So I will say, if you really see this is a pattern in your business because your product is really facilitates people to scam you because of the way people might utilize and then return, and you need to factor this into your margins. You need to say, okay, based on my knowledge, I know that 5 to 10% of my orders, people is gonna return it and actually have used it. They have actually utilized the product and things like that, and then you just factor that in. I mean, that's usually one way to do it. Or the second way to do it, because sometimes the product can fit for this, is that you just sometimes when these products are returned, you have two options. You have the option to either Amazon resell it based on the perception of how the state of the product is, or what you can do is you can return it back to you, which we do that with some of our clients. And then when you return this product for you, you can actually use this as spare parts, right? So that means you can use these broken packages and products to take specific pieces for pros actually down the line that actually genuinely use the product, gets broken a specific handle, specific piece of the toy or whatever, and you can basically use those extra return units just as your customer service basically hub. You take one piece from this return unit, this like that, and that's one way to basically eat the cost, right? Rather than fully disposing these units, you can just use them to sometimes make that customer that come back to you generally that say, oh, it broke. You take that return unit that the packaging is broken, and you send it to them by express, and that's it. So that's one way to navigate it. Yeah.
Yeah, great tip. Before we wrap, Amit, do you have like one top tip you want to share about managing logistics for Q4, or best advice to give sellers out there for Q4?
Yeah, I think we already covered it. Like, don't put all of your eggs in like one basket. So try to split up your inventory. Like if you have, I don't know, 100, 1,000 boxes, whatever, don't ship just in one LCL or just one air shipment. Try to split up the goods for numbers of like service levels. And by that, you will have better chance to have inventory in stock all the time. And if something happens for one of the shipment along the way, you will be covered with another one that's coming in. So that's the biggest thing, I think. And also the second one I would say here is consider like delays, inbound, a long inbound process, and try to ship out as early as possible in that case. Even if it's gonna cause you eventually a bit of higher like FBA fees and storage fees. It's worth it, in my opinion, in order to stay in stock for the holiday season.
So ideally, you're saying that, Amit, that you should be on a ship now-ish if you really want to, if you planned everything well.
Yeah, basically, yeah. Agree.
Wow. Enzo, do you have any last hot tips to share with us before we go into our offers section for our listeners?
I would say that just to summarize everything up, I think the one big tip with Q4 is that don't think that Q4 is a wave you can ride. It's a wave you need to prepare for it. So basically, this summarize everything we've been talking to. I think people think that Q4, the way to go about it is to basically go with the flow and trying to figure out throughout the whole season. I mean, with most of our clients, we already have the Q4 strategy up and drafted and ready to go. So that means as soon as we hit next month, we up and running. Because yes, if you leave it for the last minute and think you can ride the wave while you are in the Q4 wave, you're not gonna make it. I mean, Q4, even to be more extreme on this, is that, for example, for some of our clients, that they do big volume of in terms of sales and everything, some of them already are preparing for a Q4 for next year, right? So they're already doing forecasting. We're already going to put a purchase order in December, January for next year. Some of these people prepare 1 year in advance, right? Especially if you are selling something that's seasonal, only for Halloween, only for Christmas, only for X. So yeah, prepare. I will say if you feel you miss the boat, don't worry. Actually, it's a big opportunity that you actually sometimes miss the boat, because that means you're gonna have all this time to gather more data and have more validated data to actually make you feel confident and design the right strategy. And just make sure you implement all the things we just discussed here. And I'm sure that if you do the things right and prepare for it, and you have the right product, it's gonna be a success for Q4 for you.
Yeah, this exciting stuff. It's going to be an awesome Q4 after everybody watches this webinar, I'm sure. Vincenzo, have you got a special offer for us, or where can people reach you? Where's the best place to get in touch?
Yeah, of course. So in terms of promotion, so the promotion I'm giving to your audience. So the first thing is that we're happy to offer a 1 hour free consultation to whatever whoever reach out to us. And the second thing we're also willing to offer to your audience is a 20% discount on the first month of service you guys decide to move forward with us. So if you find us through our website, so that is EComcy.com, you're going to find a button there to book a consultation with us. And you can find EComcy in all social media platforms. And as basically as Amanda mentioned at the beginning, we specialize on Amazon and Walmart. So everything that has to do with those two platforms, happy to discuss and explore how we can partner with you. And when it comes to myself, if you have any questions, you can find me as Vincenzo Toscano on all the platforms. So Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, you name it. And yeah, happy to help where possible. So yeah, hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Vincenzo. Very, very generous of you. Amit, I know you have something to share.
Yeah, so normally we provide like 200 shipment discount for first users. I'm sure, Amanda, we will put it in our in our script, in our YouTube script and copy, so everybody can try. And of course, we also give like 30 minutes consultation if somebody wants to discuss with us. And on top of everything, I would say that like for those who doesn't know Vincenzo, that I'm not sure there's a lot of people, because Vincenzo is quite a well-known figure in the space. He's one of a kind, not just business oriented, but also personal wise, and highly recommend to connect with Vincenzo for sure.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah,
Likewise for you.
totally. So honored to have you, Vincenzo. Yeah, I mean, obviously I haven't met you in person yet, but follow a lot of your work and love what you share.
Thank you.
It's amazing stuff. So thank you, Amit. Thank you, Vincenzo. And yes, I'll put the links up for the video replay on YouTube to catch that if you didn't catch us live. So yeah, stay tuned and we'll see you guys soon.
Thank you very much for having me. A pleasure.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Good luck in Q4 for everybody.
Yes, good luck. Happy
Thanks.
selling.
Bye.
See ya.